The passenger in seat 21C leaned forward and sneered at the two men holding hands in row 22. Disgusting. Get a room, you fags. He spat loudly enough for half the cabin to hear. But when three uniformed Air Force officers stood in perfect unison and saluted the man in 22A, calling him Captain Gabriel Shadow Hawk Torres, the entire plane fell deathly silent. Gabriel's grip on Dominic's hand tightened for one heartbeat, then released as every head turned. The mocker's face drained of color. A flight attendant dropped her tray. Gabriel stared straight ahead, jaw locked the way he did when missiles were incoming, even though this was just a commercial flight from Chicago to San Francisco and he was supposed to be off duty in jeans and a plain gray hoodie. Dominic felt the shift in the air like a pressure drop before a storm. He had known Gabriel for 5 years, known the weight of the classified missions, known the nights his partner woke up whispering coordinates in his sleep, but he had never seen the military world crash into their civilian life so publicly. The lead officer, a major with silver at his temples, stepped into the aisle and spoke quietly enough for only the front rows to catch every word. Captain Torres, on behalf of the 18th Wing, and everyone who made it home because of Operation Nightfall, we salute you, sir. Gabriel rose slowly, returned the salute with mechanical precision, then sat back down. No one applauded, yet the silence itself roared louder than any cheer. The homophobic passenger shrank into his seat, suddenly fascinated by the safety card in his lap. By the time wheels touched down in San Francisco, the story had already leaked. Phones glowed in the dark cabin, passengers whispering "Shadow Hawk" like it was a password to another universe. Gabriel kept his eyes on the seatback in front of him while Dominic studied the man he loved, searching for cracks in the armor they had built together. They had always been careful, Gabriel's career demanded it, but this felt different, like the closet door had been kicked off its hinges by an afterburner. In the terminal, Gabriel moved on autopilot, collecting their bags, nodding politely to the small cluster of airmen who had waited to shake his hand. Dominic stayed 2 steps behind, giving him space the way he had learned after too many homecomings. "You okay?" he asked once they were alone in the parking garage. Gabriel's laugh was short and hollow. "Define okay." They drove toward their apartment in the Mission District in silence, the city lights blurring past the windshield. Dominic wanted to reach over but kept both hands on the wheel. He knew the questions coming, the ones Gabriel had dodged for years, about why a decorated pilot still introduced his roommate at squadron barbecues. That night, Gabriel stood at the window overlooking the twinkling hills, his silhouette sharp against the glass. "They weren't supposed to know my code name on a civilian flight." Dominic came up behind him, not touching, just close enough to feel the heat. "Maybe it's time they knew more than the code name." Gabriel turned then, and for the first time in months Dominic saw raw fear in those steady brown eyes. "You don't understand what that would cost me, Dom. What it would cost us." The argument they had avoided for half a decade hovered between them, heavier than any classified file. Outside, a siren wailed, and Gabriel flinched, the reflex of a man who had flown through worse storms than public opinion. Dominic swallowed the words he wanted to say, and instead pulled his partner into a hug that felt both safe and fragile. The plane incident had lasted less than 2 minutes, yet it had already rewritten the flight plan of their entire life. The next morning, Gabriel's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. News sites had picked up the story: Air Force hero outed mid-flight by homophobic passenger. Clips of the salute were everywhere. Gabriel muted the notifications and made coffee like it was any other Tuesday, but Dominic saw the tremor in his hands. "We can still spin this," Gabriel said, pouring 2 mugs. "Say it was a misunderstanding." Dominic set his mug down harder than intended. "Misunderstanding? Gabe, they saluted you like you were the second coming. People are calling you a hero. Maybe it's okay if they also know you're mine." The word hung their mine, a claim Gabriel had never let him make in public. Gabriel stared into his coffee as if the answers were written in the cream swirl. "My father is going to see this. My CO. The whole chain of command." Dominic felt the familiar ache of being the secret, the one kept in the dark, while Gabriel carried the light for everyone else. He reached across the counter, and this time Gabriel let their fingers brush a small concession that still felt like progress. By noon, they had to leave the apartment. Reporters waited downstairs, polite but relentless. Gabriel slipped on sunglasses, and they escaped through the back alley toward the park where they used to walk their dog before the deployments got too long. Sitting on a bench under eucalyptus trees, Gabriel finally spoke. Nightfall wasn't just another mission, Dom. I lost 2 good men bringing those pilots home. I made choices up there that still keep me up at night. If the world knows who I am, they'll dig into everything. They'll ask why I never brought you to the memorial ceremonies. Dominic listened the way he always did, letting the silence do half the work. Then maybe it's time they met me, he said quietly. Gabriel's shoulders sagged, but he didn't pull away. For the first time, the idea didn't feel impossible, just terrifying. That evening they drove to a quiet overlook above the bay. The city sparkled below like scattered diamonds. Gabriel leaned against the railing, and for a moment the weight lifted. Remember the first time we came here? You told me you'd wait as long as I needed. Dominic nodded, stepping closer until their arms touched. I still mean it. But waiting feels different when the world already knows part of the truth. Gabriel turned then and kissed him, soft and certain, the kind of kiss that said more than words ever could. In that moment, with the wind tugging at their jackets, it felt like the beginning of something honest, even if the road ahead was mined with everything they had feared. The call from Gabriel's father came at 6:47 a.m. Colonel Robert Torres' retired voice clipped like it was still 1975. Son, we need to talk. Gabriel put the phone on speaker so Dominic could hear the disappointment rolling across 3,000 miles from their family home outside Colorado Springs. I raised you to serve, not to parade personal choices on national television. Gabriel's jaw tightened the way it did before he locked onto a target. It wasn't a parade, Dad. It was a salute I didn't ask for. The colonel's sigh carried decades of unspoken rules. People are asking questions now, Gabriel. About your roommate. The base chapel group is already praying for you. Dominic stood frozen in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter. This was the conversation they had rehearsed in nightmares, the one where love became a liability measured against duty and legacy. Gabriel ended the call with a promise to visit soon, a promise that felt like walking into enemy territory unarmed. He turned to Dominic, eyes hollow. He wants me home next weekend. Says Mom's been crying. Dominic wanted to argue, wanted to say they could face it together, but he saw the fracture lines already spidering across Gabriel's composure. Instead, he nodded. I'll book the tickets. The drive to the airport 3 days later was quiet except for the radio playing old country songs Gabriel's father used to love. At security, Gabriel removed his watch, the one Dominic had given him on their 3rd anniversary, and for a split second their fingers lingered. You don't have to come, Gabriel said, voice low. Dominic met his gaze. Try stopping me. Colorado Springs greeted them with crisp mountain air and the distant rumble of F-16s taking off from Peterson Space Force Base. Gabriel's childhood home sat on a quiet street lined with American flags. His mother hugged him, first tears already falling, then turned to Dominic with the same careful politeness she had used for 5 years. Dinner was roast beef and silence until Colonel Torres cleared his throat. The newspaper called. They want a follow-up story on the plane thing. Gabriel set his fork down. There's nothing to follow up on. His father's eyes flicked to Dominic, then back. They're asking if the man sitting next to you is more than a friend. I told them it was none of their damn business. The words should have been comforting, but they landed like another order to stay hidden. Dominic felt every year of being the invisible partner pressed down on his chest. Later that night, in Gabriel's old bedroom with its faded Air Force Academy pennant, they lay side by side staring at the ceiling. He still calls you his son, Dominic whispered. Gabriel rolled toward him. He calls me Captain Torres too. Same tone for both. The honesty cracked something open between them. Gabriel really talked about the night over the Pacific when he had diverted an entire squadron to save lives, knowing it meant writing letters to widows. I carried those names alone because I thought if I let anyone in close, they'd see the rest of me and I'd lose the wings. Dominic listened, tracing circles on Gabriel's arm the way he did after bad dreams. You don't have to carry them alone anymore. The next morning brought the first real fracture. Gabriel's best friend from flight school, Major Ethan Caldwell, showed up unannounced, coffee in hand and betrayal in his eyes. Shadow Hawk? All these years and you never said a word? We flew combat together, man. I told you about my divorce, my kids. And you couldn't tell me you were. He stopped short, glancing at Dominic. Gabriel stood straighter. Gay. The word is gay, Ethan. The argument spilled onto the back porch loud enough for the neighbors to peek through curtains. Ethan left without finishing his coffee, and Gabriel sat on the steps, head in hands. He thinks I didn't trust him. Dominic sat beside him. Maybe he's scared he missed the signs. Same as your dad. For the first time, Gabriel didn't argue, just leaned into Dominic's shoulder, letting the mountain breeze carry away some of the weight. By Sunday, the local news van had parked across the street. Gabriel stepped outside in uniform for the first time since the flight and faced the camera. I served my country proudly. Who I love doesn't change that. The words were simple, yet they cost him something. Dominic could see it in the set of his shoulders. Back inside, his mother hugged him tighter than before, whispering, I'm proud of you both. Colonel Torres watched from the doorway, arms crossed, but he didn't interrupt. On the flight home, Gabriel held Dominic's hand openly the entire way, and no one said a word. The viral clip reached the Pentagon by Monday. Gabriel's CO, Colonel Ramirez, called him into the office at Travis Air Force Base the moment he returned to duty. The brass is watching Torres. Some are calling for a formal review. Others want you on the recruiting poster. Gabriel stood at attention, uniform, starched mask firmly in place. I'm still the same pilot, sir. Ramirez leaned back, studying him. Are you? The media wants interviews. Pride Month is coming. They're asking if Captain Shadowhawk will march. The question hung like an ejection seat handle. Gabriel thought of Dominic waiting at home, of the life they had started to build in daylight. I need time, sir. That evening, Dominic met him at the door with takeout and cautious hope. How bad? Gabriel loosened his tie and pulled him close. Not bad. Just loud. Over Thai curry, they talk strategy the way they once planned weekend getaways. Dominic suggested a small coming-out statement, just enough to quiet the noise. Gabriel wanted silence, more time to figure out who he was when the mission didn't define him. The disagreement simmered through the week until Friday, when Dominic's sister called from New York. I saw the video. Gabe looks good on camera, by the way. When do we get to meet the mysterious boyfriend officially? The casual question cracked open another door. Gabriel stared at the phone after hanging up. She's right. I've met your family a dozen times. You've met mine once under siege. The following weekend, they flew to Chicago for Dominic's nephew's birthday. The backyard barbecue felt like stepping onto friendly soil until Dominic's brother-in-law clapped Gabriel on the back. Heard you're some kind of war hero. So what's it like flying jets while hiding who you are? The words were meant to be joking, but they landed like flak. Gabriel smiled tightly. It's exhausting. Later, on the porch with fireflies dancing, Dominic found him staring at the stars. You don't have to hide here. Gabriel turned, eyes shining with something new. I know. That's what scares me. What if I'm better at hiding than I am at being out? Dominic kissed him right there under the string lights, and for once Gabriel kissed back without checking who might see. Monday brought the first real test at work. A young lieutenant fresh from training cornered Gabriel in the ready room. Sir, some of us were glad you're not hiding anymore. Makes the rest of us feel less alone. The quiet admission hit Gabriel harder than any missile lock warning. That night he told Dominic, there are kids in uniform counting on me to make it okay for them too. The realization shifted something fundamental. The man who had once calculated fuel and risk for a living was now calculating the cost of authenticity, and finding the numbers didn't add up the old way. Yet the military machine moved slower than hearts. An anonymous complaint landed on the equal opportunity desk claiming Gabriel's new visibility created distraction. He spent 3 hours in HR explaining that love wasn't a distraction, it was the reason he came home. Dominic waited outside the building, pacing until Gabriel emerged, looking drained but determined. They cleared me. But the message is clear, keep it professional. Dominic took his hand right there on the sidewalk. Professional doesn't mean invisible. Summer brought the invitation Gabriel had both dreaded and secretly hoped for. Keynote speaker at the Air Force Academy's Leadership Symposium. The topic was integrity in command. He stared at the email for a full minute before showing Dominic. They want the real me or the version that still fits the brochure? Dominic read it twice. They want Captain Shadow Hawk. The question is whether you'll bring Gabriel Torres too. The decision deadline loomed like a final approach in bad weather. Gabriel spent nights on the balcony running scenarios the way he once ran checklists. Dominic gave him space, but the space started to feel like distance. The breaking point arrived in the form of an old friend. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hale, Gabriel's former wingman from Afghanistan, called from Germany. "I saw the news, brother. Proud of you. But some guys back here are saying you sold out for headlines." The betrayal cut deep. Marcus had been the one who covered for Gabriel during late-night calls to Dominic, the one who never asked questions. Now even he sounded uncertain. Gabriel hung up, and for the first time in their relationship he snapped at Dominic. "This is what I warned you about. One plane ride and suddenly my entire career is a debate topic." Dominic didn't flinch. "No, Gabe. One plane ride and suddenly you have to decide if you're going to live the life you fought for or keep fighting for a life that doesn't include me fully." The argument escalated fast, words sharpened by years of swallowed truths. Gabriel slept on the couch that night, the first time in 5 years. Morning brought regret and coffee. Gabriel found Dominic on the roof garden staring at the bay. "I'm sorry," he said, voice rough. "I'm scared that if I stand up too loud they'll ground me permanently." "Not the jets, the U.S." Dominic turned, eyes red but steady. "Then we find a way to fly together. No more solo missions." They talked until the sun climbed high enough to warm the concrete, mapping out a middle path. Gabriel would speak at the symposium, but he would speak as both captain and partner. Dominic would sit in the audience, no longer hidden. The decision felt like pulling the ejection handle, knowing the parachute might hold. The symposium day arrived bright and merciless. Gabriel stood at the podium in dress blues, the silver wings gleaming. 200 cadets and officers watched as he began. "Integrity means telling the truth even when the truth is complicated." He spoke about nightfall, the losses, the choices. Then he paused, looked directly at Dominic in the third row and said, "I flew those missions because I believed in something bigger than myself. I came home because someone believed in me enough to wait. His name is Dominic, and he's the reason I still believe in tomorrow." The applause started slow, then built into something thunderous. Cadets stood. Even a few senior officers wiped their eyes. Gabriel stepped down, heart hammering, and found Dominic waiting at the edge of the stage. They embraced right there in front of the entire room, and the world didn't end. It expanded. The aftershocks arrived in waves. Positive first. Recruitment numbers ticked up among younger service members. Negative next. Anonymous letters in Gabriel's mailbox, some threatening, some pitying. His father called again, this time quieter. "The academy sent me the video. You did good, son." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of years. Gabriel hung up and cried in Dominic's arms, the kind of cry that washed away old armor. Yet the biggest test waited in the form of a promotion board. Major command, the kind that came with stars and scrutiny. The selection committee wanted Captain Torres, but they wanted him without complications. Gabriel sat across from the 3-star general who had once pinned his wings. "We need leaders who represent the best of us. Your recent openness raises questions about focus." Gabriel met the general's gaze without flinching. "Sir, my focus has never been clearer. I love my country and I love the man who helps me defend it. Those two things don't cancel each other out." The room went still. 2 weeks later, the promotion list appeared without his name. The official reason was timing, but everyone knew. Dominic found him in the garage staring at his flight helmet. "I'm sorry." Gabriel shook his head. "Don't be. I made the choice knowing the cost." Turns out the cost was never you. They drove to the beach that night, the same one from the thumbnail of their life. Barefoot in the sand, Gabriel pulled a small box from his pocket. "I've carried this for 2 years, waiting for the right moment. Turns out the right moment is whenever we decide it is." Inside was a simple titanium band engraved with coordinates, the exact location where Dominic had proposed in secret years earlier. Dominic slipped it on with shaking hands, and they stood there letting the waves erase footprints as fast as they made them. News of the passed-over promotion spread. Some called it injustice. Others called it consequence. Gabriel ignored both and focused on the squadron. He still led the young pilots, who now looked at him differently, not as a hero but as proof that the sky had room for all of them. One evening, a quiet lieutenant named Riley approached him after debrief. "Sir, I came out to my parents last month because of what you did. They're still struggling, but they're trying." Gabriel clapped the young man on the shoulder. "Trying is how we start flying level." Dominic watched the exchange from the hangar door, pride swelling until it hurt. That night they cooked dinner together, laughing over burnt garlic bread, and Gabriel said the words that had taken 5 years and 1 viral plane ride to reach. "I'm done hiding. Not just from the world, from myself." Dominic kissed him, tasting salt and second chances. The apartment felt lighter somehow, as if the walls had finally learned how to breathe. Fall brought cooler nights and a new assignment. Not major command, but something better. Instructor at the test pilot school, where the next generation learned to push limits. Gabriel accepted with the quiet confidence of a man who had already pushed his own. Dominic took a promotion at the design firm where he worked, turning military aircraft blueprints into safer civilian dreams. Their life settled into a rhythm that felt earned rather than borrowed. One crisp Saturday, they drove back to Colorado Springs for Gabriel's mother's birthday. Colonel Torres met them at the door, handshake firm this time. "Heard you turned down stars for principal." Gabriel shrugged. "Turned down stars for truth." His father studied him for a long moment, then nodded, once the closest thing to approval either of them had ever received. The backyard filled with relatives, some awkward, some genuinely happy. Dominic stood beside Gabriel openly, and no one looked away. Later, under a sky full of stars, Gabriel pulled Dominic aside near the old swing set. "Remember when I told you the military was my whole identity?" Dominic nodded. "I was wrong. You're part of it now. The best part." They swayed together slowly, the way people do when the battle is finally over and the peace feels almost too big to hold. Gabriel's phone buzzed once, a message from Ethan Caldwell, the old wingman who had walked away months earlier. "Proud of you, brother. Drinks when I'm stateside." Gabriel smiled and showed Dominic the screen. Forgiveness didn't erase the hurt, but it made room for flight. Back in San Francisco, they stood on the same overlook where the journey had turned a corner months earlier. The city glittered below, unchanged, yet everything felt new. Gabriel slipped his arm around Dominic's waist and whispered, "Thank you for waiting." Dominic leaned into him. "Thank you for flying home." The wind carried their laughter across the water, and for the first time the future stretched out wide open. No classified files, no hidden coordinates, just two men building something honest under an American sky. True or false? A man can only fully love another when he stops hiding who he is from the world that raised him.